So the youngest son says to his father, "Give me my share of the property." And here's the first piece that you need to look at, and probably one of the pieces, like I've said, and I'm going to keep saying, one of the pieces you've already looked at time and time again, okay? Because being out of context and here today is not putting us in the right mindset to think about these things as they were in this setting and in this time period, okay? Land and property and keeping with the family is really not as big of a deal today as it was then. It's just not. You leave your home, you leave your parents leave their property, right? Every other year, people are moving. It's just not the same. So it's really hard for us to grasp the depth and the importance and the weight of the fact that he wanted to take a portion of the property. He wanted to take his portion, his allotment, his inheritance financially, right? He wanted it to be divided. There were 3 levels to an Israelite's kinship, to the people in their immediate family, but then also the people that were connected to their family, and then even further from that, their tribe. They were coming out of a tribe. They were called a certain people within the confines of their family. It kept going out and out and out. It's not the same as our family units today. The Salvation Army might be considered a tribe, I would say, but it's not the same as we look at the world today. So there's these 3 levels of kinship, and they're the most important things in the lives of these people: tribe, clan, and the Father's house. And these 3 things together are called Bet Av. And the primary connection of one's identity is this Bet Av, okay? It was the only greatest importance of your own personal significance and identity, but also societally, as you were seen as significant or valuable or holding some sort of identity or place, even just in society, you were looked at for these 3 things: your tribe, your clan, and your Father's house. It was the primary connection of identity for you to yourself, for you to your family, for you to others, for you to God. The people of God and their land and their Bet Av were imperative to their covenant and their relationship with God. And if any part of these 3 were in question or in peril, then your covenant relationship with God was too in question and in peril because of the family, tribe, and clan connection. You were actually breaking this bond, not just for yourself, but for your family and your clan and your tribe, your whole household, when you were breaking this covenant connection. So you causing this damage or this failure of yours to live within this Bet Av in any way is perilous to the entire community. And brokenness fell upon everyone in your household and in your clan and in your close community, because sin entered and brokenness entered when one of your kin brought this shame upon you. So when he asks for a share of his land, this is all that's wrapped up in that. When he asks for his portion, his inheritance, he is essentially saying, I am breaking Bet Av. I am breaking these things. I am breaking these ties with my clan. I am breaking these ties with my territory. And I hate you. He's saying to his father, I hate you. I want to be so far removed from my Father's house. I want to be so far removed from my people, from this land, and ultimately the covenantal relationship with God. This is what he's desiring when he asks this question. I'm ready to go against everything that my family, the people of God, and my relationship with God have been formed by. And he's declaring, I want out. I want to cut these ties with it all, which is a life-altering statement, literally. This act could be seen, like I said, as the son saying, I hate you, to his father, and breaking covenant with God. And so the son leaves his father's house. He leaves their land. He leaves their country, which brings even further shame on the family, because you're also not allowed to marry outside of your kin. You're not allowed to marry outside of these Bet Av as these family lines. So he's breaking all sorts of covenantal rules and bringing all sorts of shame and harm and sin and darkness upon his family and this tribe. He did just about every single thing he could have to ruin his own life and his family line and to bring shame on his entire community. And surprise, surprise, it doesn't go well for him. Just when you think, I can live the way I want to live, my life doesn't affect you. What does my life have to do with you? What do my choices have to do with you? We see so clearly, time and time again. Your choices are going to affect you. They're going to come back to you. Living in sin is always going to bring about more sin. It's always going to separate you. It's always going to bring up darkness and despair and issues that you didn't need to run to in the first place. So he's at an all-time low, right? And he loses all his money on who knows what, nothing fruitful, which that really gets me. I'm like, man, you didn't even invest. You didn't even make anything of all this money. You literally just lost it all, and you have nothing good to show for it. It's gone. You did nothing valuable with your time. Nothing valuable with that money. That meant so much to your family. He spends every single thing he has, the percentage of this land that his entire family owns and lives on. He didn't do anything helpful with it. He has nothing to show. He's in a foreign land with no family, nothing to attach himself to. And now insert famine, right? As if it can't get any lower. Now there's a famine upon the land that you chose to go to. Interesting, right? The wages of sin just keep on hitting him. Can we just think for a moment of the low that this son is at? Can you just scan through your life in just one quick moment and think, was there ever a low close to this for you? Lost, estranged from family and friends, alone, hungry, unwanted, far from God, in the depths of sin, sinking in a pit of despair, so low that you are thinking about stooping down in the mud and eating the pig's food. And that's not a joke. He really was that low. Can you just take a moment to kind of get yourself into this man's story and imagine the depths of despair and separation and loneliness? And then something wild happens there, as it has for me time and time again, and as I can declare over any of you will happen to you if it's not yet, when you're in this low of the low of the low, and something crazy happens. And it says, the son came to himself. And some translations say, when he came to his senses. But the best translation, I think, is this one that says, when he came to himself. Because we all know that moment, right? Or maybe you're currently in that moment. Maybe you're like me and you've had many of those moments over the course of your lifetime, many times of coming back like, where was I just then? I don't know who that was. I don't know what she was doing. I don't know what she was saying. She's back. She's back. I'm back. You come back. You hit rock bottom spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally. You reach the complete end only to find that you know where you needed to be all along. And he came back to himself. And he tells himself in his heart, he says, I'm going to arise and I'm going to go to my father. It says, when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, and yet I perish here with hunger? I will arise, I will go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son, but please just treat me as one of your hired servants. And he arose and he came to his father and he says these things. He comes back to himself. And the first place he knows to go is his father's house. So he says, I'll go back. He ponders the statement for a moment. He says that whole little monologue that he says it in his heart. He rehearses it, right? I'm going to go back to my dad's house. I'm going to get up. I'm going to go back to my father's house. I'm going to repent. I'm going to tell him I was so foolish. I'm going to humble myself, and I'm going to beg him just to be his servant. These are the things I'm going to do. It's going to be okay. I've returned to myself. I'm going to go back to my father's house. He's getting ready, right? Like he's psyching himself out. He's pumping himself up. He's like, I'm going to do it. And then he gets there and he says all the things, right? He arose, he came to his father, but while he was still a long way off, and I try to imagine this moment, but I just think he had to be there. But while he was a far way off, his father saw him. He wasn't even close yet. And you can take that to mean whatever it means to your heart. He wasn't even close. And yet the father saw him. And he is overcome with compassion. And he runs to his son. And he embraces him. And the son says, Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, bring quickly the best robe. Come on, put it on him. Put a ring on his hand. Put shoes on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. After he saw his father from far off. Thank you, Father. The father runs. The father is overcome with compassion. The father runs and embraces him and kisses him. And the son remembers everything he pondered in his heart. And he begins to tell him, right? I've sinned against you. I've sinned against God, right? He's got this whole spiel. And the father declares, grace, 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 my son. Stop. Grace. Don't even finish your sentence. Grace. Let me hold you. Let me celebrate you. You came back. I don't even need to discuss any of this stuff. You are here with me. You came back to the right place. You came back to yourself. You came back to your father's house. Grace. Grace. Quickly. There's no time to waste. Please get my best robe. Cover my son in grace. Quickly, put a ring on his finger, right? Show him this royalty and this value, this utmost value I have for him. Let me profess it and declare it while I shower him with my favor and my grace. Place shoes on his feet. Clothe him with my message of grace and mercy and compassion and unfailing love. Bring the fattened calf, the choice meats, and let's feast and let's celebrate. My son was dead. He was dead in himself, right? And now he's alive again. To himself, to me. He was lost and now he's found. And here's how the story ends. I wish it ended on a high note. It does for that son. Here's how the story ends. And I feel a bit sad for the older brother who had been left behind. But most of all, I feel sad for myself and the times that I'm that older brother. I feel convicted, deeply convicted, asking myself, am I the older brother today? And it finishes with this. Now, his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing, and he called to one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, your brother has come, and your father killed the fattened calf because he received him back safe and sound. But the brother was angry, and he refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him, but he answered his father, look, these many years I have served you. I never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours comes, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him? And he said to him, son, you're always with me. All that is mine is yours. It was fitting to be glad and celebrate, for your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and he's found. Son, you've always been with me. You remained in your father's house. What's mine is yours. You're here. You're home. You got it. You have me. All right, so let's bring this home a little bit more, right? If you're outside your father's house, you know it. So come home. If your heart is breaking covenant and your heart is outside your father, come home. If you are in a famine, come home. If you're stuck in sinful patterns and at the end of your rope, walking in darkness, wondering how you will ever get back, come home. Just come home. Because there is so much mercy and grace and forgiveness like you could never, ever, ever have. You definitely don't deserve. And yet, it's the grace of God. It's completely unmerited and it is lavish. It's not the type of grace that you and I typically walk in. It's the grace of God. It doesn't make sense. Our grace is so conditional, right? It's so conditional. We say that it's not. We really don't want it to be. That's why we get ourselves full of Jesus, full of the Word of God, full of His presence, because we just have such great hope that our grace will be God's grace someday, somehow, some way. But listen, I'm not going to lie to you. My grace is not God's grace. It's not. I am so judgmental. I have so many conditions attached to my grace. But praise God, here's the good news. I don't have to give my grace. That's not the grace He's asking me to release to you. He's not saying, Tabitha, could you get your grace better so that you could give it to the people and it would work better? No. He's like, your grace is filthy. Your grace is not going to work. It's cheap. You didn't pay the price for it. I did. Use my grace. Use my grace. And that's the grace of the Father over this son in this situation. So the older son is like, what the heck? Like me. He did what? He spent what? He went where? He brought all this shame on us. Are you kidding me? He doesn't even get a lecture. We don't even see a lecture from the Father, right? You'd be getting a lecture if you came to my house. Let me tell you what. You'd be getting a lecture. Unless I tapped into the Father's grace. Unless I could be the one to see my child from afar off, knowing everything that just happened and say, I'm running. And I'm holding them and I'm celebrating them. And I'm clothing them with all this grace. It's unimaginable to us, this level of acceptance and forgiveness. Yet we've all received it in our Father's house. We are all walking around in this lavish, ridiculous, boundless grace. It is not like our grace. Our grace is so lacking and so faulty. It's so small compared to the grace of the Father. So we look and we aim for the grace of God, not our idea of grace, and certainly not the type of grace that we think people deserve, because my goodness, I know what I deserve. I'm familiar with my story. I know the darkest places of my life and my heart. I know my sin. I know my lowest of lows in ways that you will never, ever know. You won't know them. I'm not going to tell them to you. I know them, and my Father knows them. And yet, He gives. He gives grace, not a grace like my own. Time and time and time again. Every time I've come back to myself, there's grace. Every time I walk into my Father's house, there's grace. Every time I bring myself home to the heart of the Father, there's grace. My grace will fail. So I receive His grace, and that's what I get to give away to people. We don't want to receive people back into the Father's house like the older son. But I feel for him. Listen, seeing with my own eyes and giving out of my own resources, it's going to come out like the older son. He didn't follow the rules. I did. He didn't stay here and obey you. I did. How in the world does he deserve any of this, right? So where do you find yourself in the story today? Are you the younger son in need of coming home? Listen, receive this lavish type of grace. And it's not easy either. You would think, oh my goodness, receiving the grace of God? Yeah, I could do that. No problem. No, because He's going to walk past all your shame and all your nastiness. And He's going to be like, I love you. I forgive you. And you're going to be like, I'd like to replay those things again, Lord. Could we just hit that on repeat? I'd like to kind of bring myself down and make myself feel shameful again for all the terrible things I've done and the ways I've treated people and the sin I've held in my heart. And He's like, here's a robe. Here's a ring. I love you. I'm so proud of you. You came home. Look at you. Oh, you're so beautiful. You did so well. You came home. I forgive you. I forgive you. Here's my mercy. Here's my grace. I'm pouring it out over you. You want to try to replay all the stuff, and He's just like, nope. I forgive you. I love you. Here's my grace. Here's my forgiveness. Here's my mercy. It's not easy. It's not easy to sit down at a table and be celebrated for the garbage that I've done with my life. It's not easy. I have to practice receiving this grace, though. I have to. It is imperative that I do. Because if I don't receive his grace, I can't give his grace. And that's why we struggle so much, because we have our own grace and we're like, let's just give that. And then it's all broken and funky and it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And it doesn't do what it's supposed to do in you, and it doesn't do what it's supposed to do in the world, because it's not supposed to be that way. You're not supposed to be giving away your own grace. It's not good enough. You have to receive his grace so you can give his grace. Or are you the older son sitting in resentment and bitterness and not realizing this whole time you've been sitting in the Father's house? You're there. You're home. Take whatever you want to in his house. It's there for you. He's like, you've had everything. You've had all of me. I'm with you. Everything you need, the deepest need and satisfaction of the soul is not earthly satisfaction. Your deepest longings are not going to be met with anything in the world. You could give me $1 million, 1,000,000 mansions, all the greatest cars, and all the Nikes. Because that's what I like. And I won't be satisfied. I will never be satisfied without being in my Father's house and taking from his resources, his love, his grace, his mercy, his forgiveness. This is the only thing. The deepest longings of my soul are found in God only. God does not promise earthly satisfaction. He promises satisfaction of the soul, deeper than all this stuff on top. You're in your Father's house. Receive it, enjoy it, delight in his presence, ask him to fill you with more of his presence, more wisdom, more grace, more understanding. You get to have it all. You're in your Father's house, more peace. It's all there. Just ask for it. Or are you in the place of the Father today, wondering, how will I receive the lost? I remind you, it's not by your grace. It's his grace. It's his love. Everything you need is in him. Yours won't do it, right? It's not your grace. It's his. Yours won't do it. God's grace is sufficient. Are you in a position of trying to receive someone, but just feeling your judgment and your own stuff get in the way? Turn around, become the young son, come home, recognize you're in the Father's house, and that you don't need to give away your own stuff. You're giving away God's stuff, and then give it to that person in your life that's looking for grace. The cool thing about this is that you get to kind of compartmentalize. You get to be like, I'm not giving my grace. So therefore, if it's God's grace, I'm just going to give it freely. It's not mine. I'm not going to miss anything. I'm not going to be lacking anything if I give this away, because it's not mine in the first place. And that rule works with all of the fruits of the Spirit. So I get to be like, I'm going to pass out patience. I'm just going to toss it everywhere. It's not mine. I didn't have to access it. I didn't have to earn it. I didn't do anything for it. The Lord just put it inside of me because I live in my Father's house. That's how you get to give his grace. When you don't want to give it, you say, well, I'm not giving it. My Father's giving it. So you know what? Here you go. It's not mine. I don't care. And I don't care what you do with it. That's the other freeing thing. I'm giving away God's grace. What you do with it is up to you, not me. It's not my grace going out of me, and it's not my grace going into you. It's all his. And I get to detach myself from it and just give it and not be like, oh, wait, Lord, but what if they met? No, just give it. Just give you grace. Just give it to you freely. It's not mine. It's his.
Thank you for joining us today. If you would like to visit us in person, we invite you to 99 Ball Street in Port Jervis, New York. You can also visit us on social media. We'd love to hear from you. Have a blessed day.